So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's wonderful to see everybody here again today. It's wonderful to be back here again today. It's a pleasure to see all of you and to be able to spend an evening together. I want to first start by thanking a couple of young men, the Mirov brothers, who do such an incredible job. I've had the pleasure of knowing them since, oh heaven knows, they were little boys. But really it's a pleasure to see them and see all the programs that they're doing, and a big CHAZAQ to them. Let's have a round of applause for them. At the same time, I think we owe our thanks also to Bet Gabriel. It's just wonderful that they make this whole institution available for all these programs, lectures, and other such activities, and a big CHAZAQ u'baruch to them also. But most of all, I want to thank all of you for coming down. You can have a round of applause for yourselves too. Why not? Was that round of applause louder than the others? Anyway, it's a wonderful experience to be with you. It's been a little under a year, I think, since I was last here, and it's great to see everybody here again today. The title of the lecture tonight, as we heard, is... Did we hear? No, we didn't hear. So let's start again. The title of the lecture tonight is Life is a Roller Coaster. Hold tight. I think that everybody can relate to that. They know what it's like. You know what life is. Sometimes in the big scheme of things, for years things go well, and then they seem not to go so well, and so on and so forth. Sometimes in a day you can have ups and downs. You're not quite sure. One moment you're on top of the world, the next you're down. I was coming here in the car. My wife was sitting next to me. Well, she wasn't originally. Originally she was coming earlier with my daughter, one of my daughters. And then I was coming a little later. I get a phone call that somebody hit my daughter while she was driving. So while I was coming, I picked her up. My daughter's still not here. I guess she's waiting for the police, whatever it is. And we're driving here, and on the way we hear from Yaniv that the microphone's not working. So I said, 1 minute, we're going for this wonderful lecture. My daughter's just had an accident. The microphone's not working. She says, that's right, life is a roller coaster. I think I should invite her to give the lecture tonight. You know, let's think of what a roller coaster really is. A roller coaster. A real roller coaster. We all know what it is, right? Some people like them, some people don't like them. I think it's a lot to do with how old you are. Kids seem to love them. They love going in them. They love going up and down and upside down and back to front and everything else. Me personally, I'm not going near one. Okay, and I tell my kids, don't go on them. They say, why not? They're a lot of fun. All right. But that's what a roller coaster is. You know what a roller coaster is? I was reading the other day, they have a roller coaster somewhere 450 feet up in the air. 450 feet up in the air. I wouldn't want to be up there, unless I was in an enclosed room. And the worst thing is, when you're up there, you know that sooner or later you're going to come hurtling down. And apparently this particular roller coaster somewhere in the Midwest comes down at a speed of 125 miles an hour. I wouldn't want to be going straight at 125 miles an hour unless I'm up in the air. But to be hurtling down to earth at 125 miles an hour, I think you've got to have your head examined. But apparently not. Apparently this is very, very popular. And people go there specifically in order to have the joy of having themselves drop 125 miles an hour almost to the ground. Okay. But I think it's very much an age thing. When you're young and you don't understand the implications, you love to go on a roller coaster. When you're older and you realize, there could be problems. You hear about roller coasters getting stuck. You've heard of them, right? They get stuck upside down. You've heard of that, right? And they say people are upside down for an hour and a half, and the head is heavy, and they have problems with their necks afterwards and all kinds of things. Who needs this? But when you're a kid, you love it. It reminds me of a story of a couple. They were getting a little older now. And one evening, the wife was looking at herself in the mirror. And she was looking at herself and maybe at the wrinkles and a few other things here and there. And she looked very sad. And her husband felt bad, especially since the next day was her birthday. He wanted her to be happy. So she's looking at herself sadly in the mirror. He says to her, "Sweetheart, what would you like as a birthday present?" She said, "I'd like to be 6 again." He's scratching his head. I can't make her 6 again. But he says, "You know what I can do? I can make her feel like she was 6. What did she like to do when she was 6? She liked to go to amusement parks. She liked to go on the roller coasters. I'm going to take her tomorrow to the amusement park." Next day, he bundles her into the car. They go off to the amusement park. He buys the tickets. He goes in, buys her a Coke, gets her some popcorn, and takes her on a little rinky-dinky roller coaster. That was good. He takes her on a bigger one. You know, these parks have all kinds. And then he went for the kill. He says, "Now we're going on that big one, all the way up in the air." And they go on it, and the roller coaster wends its way slowly to the top. And then suddenly comes hurtling down, twisting and turning this way and that. And she's out of her mind. She doesn't know what to do. She's holding on, clenching her fists tight. Finally, they reach the bottom. She gets out. She says, "I'm wobbly. I can't take it. Take me home." And he takes her slowly to the car, and she's having trouble walking. Finally opens the door. She plops down into the passenger seat. He gets into the driver's seat. And he says, "So, sweetheart, tell me, how does it feel to be 6 again?" She said, "You fool, I meant dress size." But that's how roller coasters are. You know, I saw a picture recently of some people on a roller coaster. Everyone's having fun. Their hands were in the air, and there were 2 people on there looking petrified. Petrified. But I don't even know how they take these pictures. When you're on the middle of the roller coaster up in the air, they take pictures of you. I don't know how they do that. But whatever it is, but I guess the majority of people really enjoy them. Now, what's interesting is, when it comes to the roller coaster of life, people aren't so enamored of it. They'd rather not have a roller coaster in life. Much as they enjoyed the roller coaster at the amusement park, when it comes to life, it's like, "Can you stop the roller coaster? Can I get off?" Why is that? Why is it that we love a roller coaster in the park, but we don't like it in life? Well, I'm going to touch on that a little later. Keep that question in mind, because it's a good question, and we'll try and understand why that is. Let's start by looking at life as a roller coaster. And I think if we want to look at life as a roller coaster, we can actually go all the way back to Abraham Avinu alav shalom, our father Abraham. Chacham Eliyahu Kohen says in Shevet Musar, he says, Abraham Avinu alav shalom was the master of all believers. How old was he when he recognized that there was a God, there was a creator? We know, 3 years old. 3 years old. He's living in a world full of idolatry. Nobody recognizing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there he is at the age of 3, when normally you're asking questions of the grown-ups. He came to the conclusion there has to be a God. And all his life, as we know, he toiled. He made it his goal to do the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to make others believe in him. To what extent? We know. He was willing to go into the Kibshan Ha'esh. He was willing to go into a furnace because of his beliefs. You know, going to a furnace, whatever our beliefs are, if somebody would tell you, okay, those are your beliefs. If you're going to hold to those beliefs, you're going into that big fire over there. Most people would say, on second thoughts, that's just fine. Whatever they believed in their heart, they wouldn't openly say it anymore. What, I'm going to be consumed by fire over this? But Abraham Avinu believed totally. In fact, we're told, the rabbis tell us, his belief was 100%. And he believed 100% nothing would happen to him. Had he gone into that furnace believing 99.9%, he would never have come out. But he believed 100%. So this Abraham Avinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him in Parashat Lech Lecha, says to him, let me start again. And I shall make you a great nation. And he also says, and I will bless you. I shall make great shemecha, your name. And he adds, and you shall be a blessing. Now this is fantastic. God is saying to Abraham Avinu all the most wonderful things. He says, I'm going to make you great. I'm going to bless you. You're going to be a great nation. Wonderful. One pasuk before that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, before telling Abraham Avinu all these wonderful things that most people would love to hear, one pasuk before that, he says to him, Lech lecha me'asecha me'moladtecha me'beit abicha. Leave everything. Leave your land. Leave the place you were born in. Leave your father's house. And where are you going to go? El ha'aretz asher ar'eka. I'm not telling you. Go. When you go, I'll show you where. Now let's try and understand this. A person feels secure where he was born. He feels secure in his father's house. He knows people there. People trust him. He trusts them. Now, when God tells Abraham Avinu, I'm going to make you a great nation, he needs to feel some feeling of security. And God is telling him, but first, I want you to leave everything. And you want to know where you're going. If you're going somewhere, what do? You get travel brochures. You go online. You find out about the place. What's the food like? Is there kashrut there? Yes or no? Do you have to take food with you? Can you drink the water? Do you need shots? You need to know stuff before you go anywhere. God says, I'll show you. Asher ar'eka. The place that I will show you, that is where you're going to go. Not only that, if you're traveling, it's not great for having kids. I think everyone can understand that. If you want to have kids, it's good to be settled at your home, in a routine. Then you can have kids. Abraham Avinu, Sarah Emenu, he's 75, she's 65. They don't have kids yet. They want to have kids. And God's saying, okay, pack your bags, you're going on a trip. And Abraham Avinu didn't question. Did everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. And his heart was full of joy. We're told that when God gave him the ultimate test, we know there were 10 nisyonot, there were 10 tests. There's a difference of opinion as to exactly which the tests were, but everyone agrees that the final test, the 10th test, was when he tells his son, thank you, the final test was when he tells Abraham Avinu, take your son and offer him to me. We're told that Abraham Avinu went with a happy heart. Now, is there anybody who can comprehend this? A son that you waited for 100 years. And you're told to offer him as a sacrifice, and you go with a happy heart? He did, because the joy of doing God's will for him was so great. So why did Abraham Avinu, alav shalom, do all these things? Because God commanded him to do so. So what do we see here? We see when a person is at a certain level, it's not because you want to do it. It's not because you were promised great things. You might argue that perhaps Lech Lecha, which according to one opinion is the first test, Abraham Avinu passed it because he was promised good things. But what about the case of sacrificing his son? We see from this that the only reason that Abraham Avinu, alav shalom, did what he did, listened to God, is because God commanded him to do so. Good. People say, when you tell them that, that's good for Abraham Avinu. What does it do for me? It's good for Abraham Avinu. He was on a different, He was on a totally different level. His relationship to God was different to ours. So I don't really learn anything from this story. Well, what we must realize is that Abraham Avinu did not achieve his status that easily. It was precisely because of, listen to me carefully, on account of the nisyonot, because of the tests that he had to undergo, and for the word tests, read extreme hardship, that he achieved the status and greatness that he reached. As I mentioned, there are different opinions as to which the 10 tests were. Rashi, the Rambam, say things differently. But the point is this, whatever the tests were, both agree that they were very hard, they were very difficult. And the only reason that Abraham Avinu achieved the status of who he was and what he was, the father of a great nation, was because of the tests and the difficulties that most of us would say to God, you know what, God, 100%, we don't want any tests. And it's right, we have to pray not to have tests because we don't know if we're able to pass those tests. But because he did and he passed them, he achieved that greatness. The question is, why does God give these tests? Why did God give Abraham Avinu these tests? Why does God give us tests? Part of our roller coaster is, the ups are great, but the tests are the coming down at 125 miles an hour down the pole. Why does God do that? What was the purpose in testing Abraham Avinu? The Rambam says, it was to show the world that someone so great still follows God to the nth degree. That's the Rambam, Maimonides. The Ramban, Nachmanides, says something different. He says, God will not give a test to someone if that person cannot pass the test. Very important. God will not test a person if the person is not able to pass the test. He only gives tests to those he knows will pass them. Now you say, wait a minute. You're trying to tell me that all these tests only happen to good people? I see a lot of wicked people who have hardships. Correct. He says he does not give tests to Reshaim. He does not give tests to wicked people, because they will not attempt to do his will. This is getting confusing. What does this all mean? It means, if God gives someone a test, and it's a test, he feels that person is righteous and capable of passing the test. Very important. The purpose of the test is so that the person has the opportunity to show that he or she, for the sake of the Holy Torah, for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his Mitzvot, will do whatever is required to pass the test. And this in turn allows God to give a great reward to the person who passed the test that God knew in the first place was going to be able to pass the test. Very important. Again, very briefly, God gives a righteous person a test because he knows that person is able to pass the test. And when the person does pass the test, God says, because you passed this difficult test that I gave you, I am going to reward you greatly. So what does that mean for us? It means when God presents us with some trial or tribulation, some difficulty, we have the decision as to how to react. And our job must be to accept it and see it through, and not to run away from it. It's easier to run away from it. It's too difficult. I don't want to face it. God's given me a test. I don't want to face it. I want to run away from it. Much easier. But that's the exact opposite of what we must do. And we must face it and do it so HaKadosh Baruch Hu can reward us for our actions. If God would say, I knew Abraham Avinu would be able to pass the test. God knows everything, correct? If God knows everything, God knows that Abraham Avinu would have passed the test. God knows that he would have gone to sacrifice his son. God knows that he would have left his land. So why test Abraham Avinu? Sometimes people have difficulty with this concept. Do we have free will and choice? Yes, in one area. To follow the right path or the wrong path. But wait a minute. Does God know what we're going to do? Yes, God knows what we're going to do. So if God knows what we're going to do, where's the free will? So wait, this is not making sense. Just because God knows what we're going to do doesn't mean that He told us to do it. God can see in the future and knows everything, past, present, and future, right? But God doesn't make us do whatever we decide. We make that decision to follow the right or the wrong path. The fact that God can see what we decided to do doesn't make it His decision. Okay, so God could see what Abraham Avinu would do. Why test him? God can see what we're going to do. Why test us? And the answer is very simple. Because once we've been tested, God can turn around and say, because you did this, I am going to give you this reward. So when a test comes to us, it shouldn't necessarily be, oh God, why am I being tested? But rather, oh God, I am going to do everything to pass the test. And then you can have the satisfaction of knowing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to reward you for it. Shevet Musar also adds, he says, Abraham Avinu, despite all these things that happened to him, didn't kick. Many people kick. You know, anything bad happens to them, they kick, they want to get out. I've had enough, I want to go. Abraham Avinu didn't do that. And that was his strength. And that is why he reached the level he did. Had he kicked, he would have remained at the bottom of the roller coaster. Had he kicked when he was being tested, God would not have taken him back up again. But because of his desire to do whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu asked of him, do you have one that could give my lecture as well? Like I can sit down and listen?
I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, because my throat's a little hoarse. If you have one that can give my lecture, it would be great. We'll just put it up here and I'll sit down. No? I'm sorry. Okay. So, because Abraham Avinu did whatever was asked of him, HaKadosh Baruch Hu fulfilled every single promise that He gave him. So, what we see is that the ups and downs of life, to some extent, the ups, going to the top of the roller coaster, depends on us. I mentioned the two opinions about Abraham Avinu, and we said that one opinion was, the Rambam, that it was the reason he was tested is to show the world that a great person nevertheless follows the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's a great lesson for all of us. The second opinion, the Ramban, I mentioned. Also, there's another opinion which I'd like to mention. Rabbeinu Behaye. Rabbeinu Behaye says, God doesn't need this trial. It is rather the purpose of this test and the trial and the tribulation is to show the greatness of the person or of the Nabi. As we say, Hashem Sadiq Yibhan. God will test the righteous. And that brings us back to the question I asked a few minutes ago. God tests the righteous. So what about the bad things that happen to the Resha'im? What about the wicked? Aren't they also being tested? What Rabbeinu Behaye tells us is God does not test the Resha'im. You might say that's not fair. God does not test the wicked. It is only the righteous that are wicked. So what about the suffering that happens to the wicked? That's punishment, pure and simple. I'm being punished for something. Yaniv, what did I do? I'm sorry. Ashamnu, bagadnu, gazalnu, tabarnu, dofi, ulashon hara. Maybe that's what I was doing.
We'll just take care of this.
Very importantly, while we're waiting, I'd like to say, can you hear me in the back?
Yes.
That tonight's lecture is for the Refuah Shelema of Kesia Bat Dokhtar. We wish her Refuah Shelema. I believe she's in treatment outside America, right? Overseas, from what I understand. That's what I hear. But anyway, wish her refuah shlema. Wow, it works again. Is it clearer now than it was before? Yes? Good. I'm going to start the lecture from the beginning. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So let's get back to our Reshaim, the wicked. When they are tested, they're not being tested, they are simply being punished. It's a very, very important factor. Whereas when we are tested, when the righteous are tested, it is an opportunity to rise and go up the roller coaster. The Pele Yoes says, very, very interesting, he says, there is no such thing as a person who is not tested. Does not exist. No such thing as a person who is not tested. A rich person is tested in his wealth. A poor man is tested in his poverty. The wise one is tested in his wisdom. The one who is suffering is tested. The businessman, so on, everybody is tested. Even when you have fame and fortune, you're also being tested. Everything has its own challenge. Let's try and understand. I'm going to take one example. Let's take a person with a very, very keen mind. Let's say he becomes a scientist. All right? How does he use this chokhmah that God gave him, this great wisdom? Let me ask you, can you think of a scientist who was Jewish who had an amazing mind? Einstein. Everybody says Einstein. Everybody. In fact, when you say about a person, that kid is an Einstein, you want to say he's brilliant, you say he's an Einstein. That's how brilliant Einstein was. That's how brilliant Einstein was, and that's how he became famous because of his brilliance. Let's just talk a little bit about Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein apparently once received a cable from someone by the name of Rabbi Herbert Goldstein. It was a very short telegram. And it said to Albert Einstein, "Do you believe in God?" Albert Einstein, this amazingly intelligent human being, answered, "I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists, not in a God who concerns himself with the fates and actions of human beings." I'm going to translate that in a minute. But first, I want to tell you, just in case you don't know, who Spinoza was. Spinoza was also Jewish and also had a brilliant mind. He was a philosopher. Unfortunately, his philosophy led him to hold opinions that went against mainstream Judaism, went against the Talmud and the other holy works. In 1656, they placed him in Harem. The Hachamim placed him under a ban. They excommunicated him, Spinoza. It was an unusual harem because it was never ever revoked. He remained forever in harem. When that happened, he changed his name from Baruch to Benedictus, which of course means the same thing. So this brilliant Jewish mind is the one who was the role model, apparently, certainly in terms of belief of God, for another great Jewish mind, Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein's problem was the following. He tried, as have many scientists, to prove that there was no creation of the world, but couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. Whatever he tried to fathom out and figure out went wrong, which led him to make the statement, or to believe, that there was a God who created the world. He was willing to admit that because he had to. But you know, we have one God. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. We have only one God, and this God is in charge of everything. He created the universe. He is the all-powerful, the omnipotent. He is everywhere. He is the omnipresent. He deals with the world at large, and He deals with our little problems on a day-to-day matter, on a day-to-day basis. This is one God. But He kind of drew a line down the middle. And He said, I believe in a God who created the world, but I don't believe in this concept of a personal God. Why? What was His problem? Apparently, this great mind could not, or perhaps we should say, was not willing to understand the concept that there could be suffering in the world and that it had a purpose. In his mind, if there is a God, and the God is good, there can be no such thing as suffering in the world. There could be no such thing as cruelty in the world. And this great mind was not willing to look at the obvious facts that there is a God, and that we are here for a purpose, and that it is our job to make the decision which path we're going to follow. So what do we see from this? What we see is that here we have a great scientist, a great mind, great chokhmah given to him by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, being tested and regrettably, in this matter, failing. Because we understand that it is very, very different to what his comprehension was. Surprising, isn't it? So we see that everybody is tested. Every living soul is tested on this earth. And you know what? Speaking of living souls, that's another thing he didn't believe in. He did not believe that when the body dies, the soul lived on. Which of course we know, this is one of the fundamentals in Judaism. Once you don't believe these fundamentals, then everything falls apart. The Pele Yoetz continues, he says, wealth is actually a greater test than poverty. Say, hey, how can that be? It's very hard being poor. God forbid, nobody should have to be wanting. He says, it's almost guaranteed if a person is wealthy, that it's going to lead him to some isurim, some forbidden acts. What could they be? Feeling superior to others. Ignoring the cry of the poor. Not supporting those who study Torah. Torah institutions. Not wanting to lend money or lending incorrectly or inappropriately. Not doing Hachnasat Orhim correctly, the way Abraham Avinu certainly did. Our problem is, we don't notice when things are going well. When we're at the top of that roller coaster, we don't notice that things are going well. We're only aware of the irritations at that point. Somebody didn't speak to me nicely, and I'm really bothered about it. Really? If things were going badly, you would say, I'd have 100 people not speaking to me nicely, but let me have food on the table and a roof over my head. But unfortunately, when things are going well, we don't realize it. When do you realize the height of the roller coaster? Well, when you're at the top, you feel it. I've never been up there. I'm just imagining. You're not going to get me up there. You look down and you see, it's pretty high, but I'm tight in here. The bar is over me. I'm holding tight. But you don't realize the height you were at till you start dropping vertically 125 miles an hour and leave your stomach and lunch back upstairs. That's when you realize how high you were. And that's how it is in life. We don't appreciate what we have and where we are till we start losing it and start hurtling down. I've been saying that a lot of the ups and downs are from God. But not all. Some are actually due to us. Sometimes it might be a result of our attitude. I see people, for instance, who want to push very hard to get what they want. There are all kinds of people in the world. There are some people who want to be doormats. People walk all over them. That's terrible. Absolutely terrible. You should stand up for your rights. You have to go out and do things. But sometimes, you know what? Even when you're 100% right, depending on the circumstances, put your head down. If there are bullets flying, you may be right. This is your house. You're allowed to stand up upright in your house. Yes, but if there are bullets flying, do me a favor, put your head down. There are some people who have the attitude, this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to get. and they push, and they do whatever it is. They don't leave people alone till they get what they want. The problem is, if you push a lot, you have to know somebody is going to push you back in return. I'm not saying it won't happen if you're a nice guy who doesn't push, but it will happen much more if you push. Because people are a reflection of us. If you are nice to people, people will be nice back to you. Are there exceptions to the rule? Sure. But the rule is, people are a mirrored reflection of you. If you are tough with people, people will get tough in return and push you. Now here's the problem. Some people I see push, push, push. Once somebody pushes them back, they fall apart. They can't take it. And they say, why did this happen to me? Why it happened to you is because you caused it to happen. You pushed maybe too hard. You upset and ruffled too many feathers. If you're the tough kind of person and you don't mind pushing and being pushed back, I guess that's one thing. But here you have to look at yourself. If you are a normal human being who doesn't like being unnecessarily pushed, you have to know what you do is what you're going to get back in return. Some people also feel that their position is such that they don't want to be slighted. They want to feel that I'm important. People have to treat me with respect. That's also an issue. You know, you're right. If you have a certain stature, people do have to react a certain way with you. But the question is, how do you speak to the people? How do you get them to rectify? There are times you should really just be quiet, not talk about it. And there are other times when you should speak about it, but when you speak about it, make sure you do it in a nice way. It reminds me of a story of an officer in the army. And he needed change for something. And there was a soldier near him, and he said, "Soldier, do you have change for a quarter?" And the soldier looks in his pocket, and he says to the officer, "Sure thing, buddy." The officer says to him, "That's not the way you address an officer. Let's try that again. Soldier, do you have a quarter?" The soldier stood to attention, saluted, and said, "No, sir." You can't say that he didn't get what was coming to him, yet people, in this case, will say, of course, it was going to come to him. But when we ourselves behave in life sometimes the same way, we don't see it. We don't see it. That we stand on ceremony, we don't handle things even if we're right. There's a right way and a wrong way of handling it, and depending on how we handle it, that's how people respond back to us. All right, I mentioned at the beginning that people love going down roller coasters. Some people, I got to keep saying that. Some people love going down roller coasters, especially the ones that have a sheer drop with loops and twists and turns in an amusement park. Yet, they will cry when life puts them on a roller coaster that's going down 125 miles per hour with loops and turns and twists. What is the difference? Let's picture what happens. You go to the amusement park. You go on the roller coaster. And it goes up and it creeps to the top. And finally it gets to the top and you see them, they're sitting there. Sitting there. You almost need binoculars, and they're sitting there. And it's probably a good feeling, they're up on top of the world. But you know what? They know at that point what's going to come. They know that they're not going to be at the top forever. They know they're suddenly going to come crashing down with twists and turns, and they're going to have a ball, they're going to shriek and howl, and it's going to be wonderful. And then finally they're going to go all the way down to the bottom, and it's going to level out, and everything's going to be fine, and then maybe it'll go up again and do the whole thing all over again. And then eventually they'll get out and come back again next year. The only reason they don't go straight back on it is the line is too long, because there's another 850 people standing on line to go up this crazy thing. Okay. Now, when life takes you slowly up to the top, and you're there, and you're standing there at the top, and you're looking down at the world and everybody below, you think you're going to be there forever. Why? Because you forgot who put you there. You forgot you didn't get there by yourself. You forgot it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, who took you up there. You started thinking it was your own doing. You started thinking it was Kohi Ve'osem Yadi, didn't you? You thought it was the strength of your hand. And since you thought it was the strength of your hand, you figured nothing's going to bring you down. But once we realize it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, that put us here, then we understand that any moment now we could come crashing down. And if it does happen, and we're hurtling down, we're in panic, we're in terror. We're not going, wee, what a ride, I'm enjoying this. We're terrified, we're scared stiff. We don't know what's going to happen. What's going to happen? Where's it going to end? What's going to happen to us? How come? How come we don't say, wee, this is fun. And then when I reach the bottom, I'm going to try and come up again. One word answers the question. Emunah. We don't have any. When we're on the roller coaster of the amusement park, we have full faith in man to make sure that we get off at the bottom. But when we come hurtling down in life, we have no faith that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to stop us at the right time and then let us go up again. It is a complete and utter lack of faith. No emunah and no bitachon in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Plain and simple. Because if we had faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when things are down, we would know that He will not do more than we can take, and He will take us up again, like Abraham Avinu. That is the difference between us and Abraham Avinu. When he was tested, he understood he had nothing to worry about. Whatever God says, I will do. When we are tested, we fall to pieces because we don't believe in our heart of hearts, or we forget at that moment when things are going rough, we forget that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there and that He is going to take care of us whatever happens. Why is that? To keep asking the same question. Well, we have an answer for that. In those days, we say, there were miracles. Miracles took place. Not now. You know what? They say we're on a lower level today. We're on a lower level than we were all those generations ago. The generation that came out of Messiah, came out of Egypt. We're much lower than they were. But look at the miracles they had. Look at the Othoth and Moftim, the wonders and signs that God did for Bnei Yisrael, for the Jewish people when we were in Mitzrayim. Look at the plagues. Look at the crossing of the Yam Suf, the Red Sea. Unbelievable miracles that took place. You know what? If we had those miracles today, we would be every bit as strong as Abraham Avinu alav shalom. Really? Let's revisit what happened when we came out of Messiah. You're right, absolutely right. Othoth and Moftim, unbelievable signs and wonders that took place. We came out. We crossed the Red Sea. Nobody had ever seen anything like this, to the extent that we sang Shirah when we came out the other side, safe and dry, and all the soldiers of Paro were dead, and all their rechush was thrown up for us, all the wealth was thrown up for us on dry land. Unbelievable. And 7 weeks later, the most awesome revelation in the history of mankind. We stood at Ma'amad Har Sinai, we stood at Mount Sinai, and we received the Torah. What an amazing, amazing revelation. And less than 40 days later, Ele Elohecha Yisrael. This idol is your gods, O Israel. What happened? What happened? Less than 40 days later, after the most amazing revelation that took place in the whole world ever. How could such a thing happen? The answer is, phenomenons and miracles are not enough to keep us going. They were not enough to keep Bnei Yisrael going. A miracle or a major event can provide a temporary boost, but that's all it is. It's like you're driving in your car, you need a little boost. The guy comes along, gives you a boost, but your car has to keep going by itself. That boost is just a little something that gets you to keep going. But you have to, from within, be able to keep going. You have to keep driving that car. It cannot come from outside. So too, when we have an amazing event take place in our lives, we have to remember that that gives us a spark. That gives us the desire to keep going. But if we want to keep going, we are the ones from within who have to provide the energy, the inertia, and whatever it is that is needed to keep us going along the path. We cannot not rely on outside events and outside miracles. I remember speaking about, less than a year ago, as I mentioned, speaking right here about dating and marriage and all those good things. And I want to make a parallel to what we're talking about. Some people will tell you when they date, there's a feeling of excitement, there's a high. Their heart starts pounding while they're dating. Why do so many couples, not everybody, but so many couples, a year later, or a different period of time, but let's just take a year after marriage, feel there's been a yeridah, a decline? The relationship is not at the same level of intensity as it was before. The answer is that making a relationship work is not dependent on highs and excitements, but on constant work of giving and doing to reach a goal, to maintain a path. Yes, you should remind yourself periodically of the highs. Look at photographs and the like. Sure. But that's just a reminder to give you some kind of impetus to keep going. But this in itself is not what keeps you going. It's not miracles we need, but desire and effort on our part. One's level of religion. Baalei Teshuvah. What does Baalei Teshuvah mean? Hopefully everybody is a Baalei Teshuvah. Basically there's two categories. Most people like to refer to Baalei Teshuvah or use the term to refer to people who were not religious and became religious. But in fact that's wrong, because somebody who's religious should not be tomorrow at the same level he's at today. He should be higher. And he is also a Baalei Teshuvah. We have to keep growing. Everybody needs to be a Baalei Teshuvah. What causes a person though to become a Baalei Teshuvah? Very often, something happens to a person or in their life or something they see that triggers a growth in their religion. It could be a lecture. It could be a seminar. It could be a rabbi or a teacher that they had that they related to. Sometimes a small personal miracle that took place. Or they were inspired by a lecture or a CD. It's new and it's exciting and the person grows. And then after a while, sometimes, you see regression. I want you to know, I feel so good when I see people growing in the Torah because they've understood or they heard something. Sometimes people come to me, they heard one CD, perhaps of mine, perhaps of somebody else's. One CD. And that one CD motivated them to go much deeper into religion. I feel so good. And there are people for other reasons. They get motivated. But what breaks my heart is to see those who later go down. They may still be religious. They may still be good Jews. They still may be Orthodox. But they're not where they were before. But they should be higher than where they were before. But they're not. They've gone down. It breaks my heart. Why is that? If we look at the generation of Egypt, of Mitzrayim, and we say, if we had those miracles, then we would also be Sadiqim, then what we would have, in fact, is nothing. Nothing. Zero. Why? Because look at what happened to them at their level. We must learn from that and realize that it's not from these outside miracles, it's from within. We have to keep on that path. We heard something from a rabbi we liked. We experienced something. We witnessed something. That's fine. It got you motivated. Fine. Now you have to be the engine that keeps you going. Do not wait for miracles to occur or events outside to motivate you anymore. Look back at that, and if you find other events, that's fine. Remember what motivated you. That's good. But make sure that it is your engine now that is purring and humming and keeping you going. I want to tell you a story of a real roller coaster of life. It's in a sefer, a book called Me'il Tzedakah, Ba'acham Eliyahu Kohen. He's taken it from the story from the Yalkut Ruth. There was a very pious individual, a good man, a religious man, who lost all his money. That's a terrible thing. You have something and now you have nothing, and you're suffering and you're hungry. That's a horrible, horrible feeling, a horrible experience. His wife was a wonderful lady, also a pious lady, Isha Keshera, a very, very good lady. What could they do? He got a job. He got a job plowing the field. One day, he's in the field, and Eliyahu Nabi, Zechur Latov, comes to him. But he's disguised as an Arab. And he says to him, I can offer you, in this version he says 7. The other version is 6, but we'll stick with 7. I can offer you 7 good years. When do you want them? Do you want them now? 7 good years. Or do you want to keep going the way you are now and have them at the end of your life? Man says, go away, go away. What are you, some kind of magician or something? I don't want to deal with you. Go away. But Eliyahu Nabi came back 3 times and he said, I'm going to give you 7 good years. When would you like these good years? Would you like them now? So that everything's going to be wonderful for you for 7 years, but afterwards, I guess you're going to go back to where you are now. Or do you want to suffer through, and the end of your life, whenever that is, a long life, the last 7 years are going to be beautiful? That's a difficult question, isn't it? Let me ask you, what would you take? What would you suggest he takes? Last. Wait till the end. Save the best till last. No. Say, take it now. You're a businessman. But most people by far said, save the best till last. Could you imagine what it is? Could you imagine what it is to have now and then suffer later? The rest of your life? Whereas the other way, at least at the end it's going to be good. You're going to die happy, as it were. The man said to him, an option we never thought of. He says, I must go ask my wife. I don't know why we didn't think of that. His wife, as I said, was a very, very good woman. And he went to her and she said to him, take it now. That comes as a surprise to me, I've got to tell you. Take it now. Okay, so he goes back and he tells this Arab, he says, I'll take it now. He says, all right. He says, before you get back home to your yard, your blessings will be waiting for you in your home. The man goes back. His sons were outside digging the earth with their fingers, and they struck something, and they found a big treasure enough to last them 7 years. And they called their mother. And he had hardly entered his courtyard when his wife came to him to bring him the good tidings. He immediately thanked HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and his mind was at peace, at least now, for 7 years. What did his righteous wife do? She told him, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has done this wondrous deed for us. Let us now do Gemilut Hasadim. Listen to what she said. God has done something wonderful for us. Let us do wonderful things for others. Let us take care of those who need. That's what we have to do with our money. And she told her young son, write down everything that we give. 7 years came, 7 years passed. When you're starting 7 years, it feels like forever. But when you're at the end of it, you don't know. You hardly blinked, and they've gone. And the man comes up to him and says, it's me. I've come to take back all the good that I gave you. And he said to him, he's a smart man, he said, before I took from you, I consulted with my wife. Before I give it back to you, I have to go speak to her. She said to him, tell him, if you can find any other people more trustworthy with what you deposit with them, give it to them. God heard their words, saw their gemilut hasadim, and instead of taking away, added to what they had. We see from this that our actions can and do affect the roller coaster. She took the money up front. She built the pillars, which would be the support that would stand for them forever. Part of how life treats us, its ups and downs, are how we perceive things. You know, the cup is half full, the cup is half empty. All right. If we truly believe in the concept that all that God does is for the good, then we will not feel the downs where other people feel them. Also, our expectations are very important. What do we expect out of life? What do we expect from God? There are those who are content if the day passes as it should. Nothing major untoward happened. No undue problems. Others expect more. They expect things to happen for them, things to go well for them. They expect great honor. And these people have greater disappointments. And I think the best way to illustrate it is, you know our officer in the army that we spoke about earlier? I want to tell you another little story about him. One day he got a new office. He goes into his office. There's nothing there yet, just a chair, a desk, and a phone. Hey, he sits down, he's feeling good. A soldier knocks on the door and comes in. And this officer had a problem. He had this need to impress everybody. So he immediately picks up the phone and says, yes, General. Yes, General. Certainly, General. As a matter of fact, I'll be speaking to the President later on this afternoon. I will pass on the message. Thank you, General. And he hangs up the phone. He turns to the soldier and he says, what can I do for you? The soldier says, nothing. I was sent to install your telephone. If you desire importance, you will be inviting problems. It's a very basic rule. If that is your goal, you're looking for problems. I want to give you talk about one other aspect of roller coasters. And that, of course, is financial. People feel that quite acutely. Of course, it should not be the most important thing. Health, long life, good life, maswal, these are the most important things. But people feel the financial matters very acutely. It says, there's a mashal in the Sha'ashu'im, which I would like to quote to you. But before I do that, I would like to quote you something that Hacham Yosef Haim Alav Shalom mentions that his father actually talks about. We know that the story of Yaakov Avinu Alav Shalom, there's the story of the sulam, the ladder. And it says, "Ve'ahalom ve'hinei sulam musab asa ve'rosho magia hashamayma." The Yaakov Avinu Alav Shalom was dreaming, and he dreamt of a ladder. We all know the story very well. The base of the ladder was on the ground, and the top of the ladder reached the heavens. All right. Everybody makes and talks about a famous gematria that the word sulam, ladder, is the same as mammon, money. The value is 136. Do the math later, please. But he asks the question, why do we use this gematria? Why do we use the gematria of sulam? There are a lot of other words that also have the same gematria. Som, fast. All these words have the same gematria. Kaful, Hizkiyahu. I don't know how you translate. You know how to translate Hizkiyahu. Hezekiah. Thank you. You helped me out with that once before, a few years ago, I remember. Rosalind. Thank you. Oh, the name is Rosalind. I thought it was Hezekiah. Okay, fine. And also it says, the angels of God are going up and down. So why are we using this gematria of mammon for sulam? And he says the following. he quotes a mashal in the Shashu'im, which goes as follows. There was a ladder with 10 rungs against the wall of a house. The owner of the house put it against the house, and there it was. Now, if you look at a ladder, every rung is the same. If it's made of metal or made of wood, every rung is the same size, same shape. But the rung on the top felt superior. Why? Because it was at the top. And looked down at the others and said, if our owner put me at the top, it must be I'm better than the rest of you. And especially vis-a-vis the one at the bottom. Oh, did he ridicule the poor rung at the bottom? That rung was at the bottom and he was all the way on the top. He felt very good. He felt very superior. A man was walking past and he heard this. He heard this rung on the top being very arrogant. And he said, I have to do something about this. What did he do? He took the ladder and flipped it. The bottom rung, which was being made fun of, is now at the top. And the one that was at the top that was being arrogant is now at the bottom. What happened? The one that was now at the bottom went quiet because he understood what happened and he was embarrassed. The one at the top was not arrogant because he knew where he was before and how he was being made fun of and how it could change at any moment. So that's why we're told we make the comparison of sulam, ladder, and mammon. Why exactly? We're going to see now. It says don't show off if you have any money because it's like being on a ladder. You could be at the top today and you could be at the bottom tomorrow. It's like a gagal hozer, a wheel that goes round and round and round. When we speak about the angels of God, Malachei Elohim, olim wa yordim bo, go up and go down, says these Malachei Elohim are the angels that are in charge of mammon, in charge of money. And the olim and yordim bo are the people who are going up and down financially. So that is the reason we have this comparison. And we have to always remember that. If we are blessed with money, it's a wonderful thing. But never be arrogant about it. And if we lose it, we have to understand that's how it is. God is the one who gave it to us, and God is the one who can take it away from us. And it is just a simple matter of flipping a ladder. That's all there is to it. If we remember that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the creator of the world, if we remember that, and we don't forget that, because the problem is that sometimes we tend to forget that, then we understand anything can change. But we also understand that we have nothing at the end of the day to fear. Speaking of which, we're told in the Gemara, based on David HaMelech, King David alav shalom, if there is a sharp sword resting on a person's neck, I mean that's as far as you can go. The sword has come and is resting on the person's neck. At that point, you know and I know it's over. The Gemara tells us, at that point, you must not refrain from praying. You cannot say, it's over. I'm not going to pray anymore. You must continue praying. Even if we use all our logic and all our wisdom and all our experience and our understanding to gauge a situation, and we know, based on our life experience, that this situation is now utterly hopeless. There is no hope anymore. We're told you must not lose hope. Because losing hope is back to what I said earlier, not recognizing who is the master of the universe, and therefore not having the faith that we have to have in such a case. So, let's summarize. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us tests. And depending on how we do in these tests, we get reward. The better we do, the more the reward. A test is an opportunity for reward. You may see a test as going down the roller coaster. A test is the opportunity to be going up the roller coaster. Emunah, faith. First of all, to do number one, which is do the tests and pass with flying colors, we need it for that. And that is the difference between the amusement park roller coaster and the roller coaster of life. The third point, do not rely on outside occurrences. You have it in you to achieve what it is you need to achieve. It's very important to remember that. I don't need something from outside. If I get a boost from outside, fine, but I don't need it. I have the capability of doing it by myself. 4, our actions, our own actions, affect what happened to us. Like the story of the 7 good years. Don't forget that story. 5, always treat other people with respect. And if you see somebody who's no good, behaving badly, learn from them. Just as you see how hideous their ways are, learn never to be like them. Those are the basic rules for tempering the highs and the lows of the roller coaster of life. If we follow these rules, the highs will be less high. You'll say, wait a minute, that's not good. That is good. The higher the high, the greater the fall. We do not want our highs to be too high. We must temper it. We must control it. We must limit how excited we get and how elated we get about our highs. And also, if we behave this way, our lows will not be as low, and we will not feel as badly about the lows as somebody else who doesn't feel the way that we do. So if we could do that, we will control the highs, we will control the lows. And because that means, as a result, we are following the right path, we have faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're doing what He asks of us, when we get a test, we go all the way to do God's will and what He requests of us. We know as a result of that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu in His infinite mercy will bring us the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, Me'et Kam B'merav B'Yameinu, U'echen Yirasol V'nomar Amen.